Welcome to Mo's Market Pulse. I'm your host, Sara Mokaram, founder of Mo Digital Solutions, where we help businesses hit their revenue goals and thrive. On this podcast, we talk with industry leaders about their business, market trends, growth strategies, and what's ahead. Today, I'm super excited to have our guest, Kiran, co-founder and CEO of Wexa AI. With a strong background in product strategy and engineering, Kiran is driving innovation at the intersection of AI and enterprise operations. So, thank you so much for joining me today. And I would love to just start with your journey and the story behind Wexa AI. I always love to hear how founders get to where they are today. So, would you mind just sharing a bit about your professional background and what led you to Wexa AI?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Sarah. So I'm one of the co-founders of Wexa, and what we do at Wexa is it's a agentic automation platform that can pretty much automate any business process in an organization. And most of the idea stemmed up from the background that I had. So I kind of come from both corporate background as well as entrepreneur background. I'm a serial entrepreneur. But before that, I've been working in the aerospace industry, wherein I was with Airbus for a couple of years and on various aircraft programs. And after that, I've started my first company in book industry. So specifically in e-commerce industry related to books, that too in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And then post that, I was into video streaming industry, and then what I built is Vexa. So fundamentally, when you look from a business standpoint of view, it is always about processes, people, and practices. And people might change, practices might change, but business processes is the one that actually keeps an organization A different from organization B. And when you have multiple systems in larger organizations, especially the integration of these systems kind of becomes one of the biggest problem. And that's exists processes to ensure that everybody is kind of using the systems in the right way they are supposed to. And what Vexa is doing is it's able to gobble up a bunch of business processes, and it's able to spin out AI co-workers within organizations such that most of the manual workload can actually be taken over by Vexa AI co-workers. And the idea here as well is to really augment humans with AI co-workers, which eventually will turn into AI productivity. The transition that we see within organizations as well is that if you look from an org chart standpoint of view, there are different departments that are usually there within organizations, and we do see that the way that organizations functioned in silos internally is also going to change. So there is going to be a cross reference between the departments, and the gaps that were there between these departments would be filled with AI co-workers. That's the trend that we think is going to be the possibility in enterprises, and that's the market that we're chasing.
Okay. And for the problem that you were initially trying to solve when you launched Wexa, has that evolved since the beginning at all?
It's the common problem, I would say. I mean, at every stage, people try to deal it differently and solve it differently. There is always this saying in the software world that software has overpromised and under-delivered, because, at the end of the day, most of the software that is existing within an organization is also to solve this very problem. But unfortunately, we still have gaps. And I think, if you look from a systems integration perspective, it all started with something called as business process management language somewhere in 2008 2010. So back then it is more about service oriented architecture, and microservices kind of came into picture, and BPM kind of evolved into RPA, and now that is evolving into agentic automation. The problem remains the same, but the way that we are solving the problem is different this time.
Okay. And so zooming out a bit, the world of AI and automation is moving fast. So I'd love to get your perspective on what's happening in that space more broadly. What trends are you seeing in enterprise automation right now that you think leaders really need to pay attention to?
See, the biggest difference right now is that we now have systems that can actually understand the context. almost equivalent to a human, or probably they would get to a point where they will be able to understand the context equivalent to the human. They are not intelligent, they just understand the context. And that is already a very big leap in enterprises, because so far, the automation that we saw in enterprises is more of a rule-based automation, whether it's the automation 1.0 or 2.0, which is RPA. This one is more or less, I don't even call it as 3.0. Maybe you should give it like 100.0 sort of versioning for what is happening right now, because pretty much in our view, close to 70 to 80% of whatever that is being done in the organization can actually be automated, because most of the things that are system oriented, let's say software system oriented, or anything that you do on a computer, can actually be automated as we speak today. So with agentic automation, what happens here as well is, traditionally what is not possible in the physical world is now actually going to be possible. For example, when you look at Internet of Things or Industrial 4.0 in the manufacturing sector, back then when people came up with the concept of integrating sensors into every part of your life, the life cycle of this sensor data kind of ended at saving the data in a, let's say, data lake. Okay, but beyond that, the sort of insights or the sort of actions that you can take on this particular data is very contextual, and that did not happen. And agentic automation kind of paves that way for the enterprises, and things that weren't really imagined earlier can actually be possible in enterprises. So for enterprises, this is going to be one of the biggest productivity boosters. And I think a lot of people were also using the similar sort of terminologies, like there will be only two kind of enterprises, one with which implements automation and the other one which doesn't implement automation. I kind of disagree on that slightly, because this is too much of a hype, because at the end of the day, enterprises are more about business processes. Okay, so no, yeah, the whole notion of autonomous agents or autonomous general intelligence, I don't really think would make sense for an enterprise. It might make sense from people who are seeing outside the enterprise, but within the enterprise, you still need humans to actually operate. And that is where, here in an enterprise context, it is always about humans driving intelligence within the organization. And I think that's the direction that most of the agentic automation is also going to go.
And from your perspective, how is the competitive landscape shaping up in this space? And what's the biggest shift you've noticed in the last year with the competitive landscape?
Pretty interesting question, actually. Thank you for asking that. From a competitive landscape aspect, it's pretty broad, because you kind of, in this particular space, you kind of have competition from service industry. Let's say IT services industry on one side, and then you also have competition from product industry. So there is no one player who takes it all sort of situation here. The market itself is huge enough that there is room for a large number of players in this particular space. And then on one side, there is always this debate between horizontal platforms versus vertical agents as well. So there is also going to be a competition in that particular direction, because there will be some vertical agents who go extremely deep into a problem, but there are some platforms that stay at a horizontal level but go broad in terms of the number of domains that they can actually tackle as well. So it's gonna be a balanced act between multiple players. But again, the traditional ones that are there in automation space, like say for example the Zapiers of the world or Automation Anywhere of the world, they will still be relevant, because there is a lot of legacy customer base that these guys have, and they are also evolving in terms of how they wanted to tackle this whole space. So it's going to be pretty wide spectrum of players in this.
Okay. And are there any players or developments out there, even outside your direct competitors, that you're watching closely or even find particularly exciting about what they're doing?
So in perspective, one thing that is super exciting is is the direction in which this whole space is evolving, even from a standardization perspective. Because one part of the story is obviously the language models becoming stronger and stronger every day. Stronger in the sense, um, they they may not become more intelligent, but the accuracy levels of these models can actually increase. So over a period of time, and the language models might become smaller, such that you can deploy it on, let's say, on your Mac. That is one exciting story of this. And the other thing that is extremely exciting for us is, as a matter of fact, suddenly intelligence has become more like a utility, wherein it's like water, it's like electricity. So intelligence is also going to become something like that, and which is almost leading us to believe that this particular space is going to evolve over a period of time as well. So that being said, the pace at which the developments are happening in the open source world, both on the model side as well as the standardization side as well. Like, integrations have always been one of the toughest problem to tackle usually between systems. I mean, yeah, there are standards that came from let's say RESTful APIs or GraphQL, etc. But for the first time, we are actually seeing standardizations where, I mean, like, for example, MCP is one standard that we can consider at this point, wherein people are actually being open to enable, LLMs to actually talk to systems. Though it is in a very nascent stage, this is going to pave a world where we cannot have interconnected systems, which makes it far more easier for data transportation, as well as intelligence being distributed across multiple systems as well. That's something very exciting for us in terms of what we can actually achieve from agentic automation itself.
And so I want to shift gears now and talk a little bit about growth. And building a company like Wexa, I'm sure, involves a lot of strategic decisions. And so what have been the most effective channels or strategies for acquiring new customers for you so far?
So for us, one of the biggest challenges being able to build a deep tech like this, because there are lots of nuances that you will have to take in, because these are the sort of platforms on which a lot of people as well as the organizations actually rely on for their day in and day out operations as well. So that kind of makes these sort of systems into critical systems. I mean, there you cannot where you need to have a near time accuracy in terms of whatever expectations that are there on the system. So that is one part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge usually is in terms of the education that people have. Because of the hype that is happening today, people over expect on what these systems can actually do. But this is also an emerging tech, equally moving with something like LLM space on the other side, because both of these two things are intertwined and going in parallel. So there is a lot of education that is obviously required even for the potential customers that we try to acquire. So it might start slow, but over a period of time, with sort of education that is actually happening within the market as well, the growth story is also going to be easier in a longer period of time. That being said, one of the other aspects as well is to identify what sorts of use cases that customers have to tackle themselves as well, because the cost of running an agentic automation system is usually slightly higher, because these are one of the highest consumers of infrastructure. It's not like a simple chat messages that you send across to an LLM. It's here, the LLMs also are being overburdened with so many unnecessary calls in agentic automation as well. So because of that, it's slightly expensive proposition for enterprises. So they would also have to make some sane decisions in terms of what sort of ROI they are expecting. And so there is enough consulting work that they'll have to do internally in order to come up with a use case. So these are part and parcel of the story. And the last one obviously is the fear that people have that there might be job loss, because the moment somebody comes in with a proposition that productivity can be increased, the first question that comes into anybody's mind is like, okay, hey, do I have to fire people, or as an executive, or am I going to lose my job? So these are the first questions that we kind of get posed with as well. But in reality, that's not going to be the story. We already know that the quality of the jobs are actually going to become better and the number of jobs that are going to be produced is also going to be higher because of this phenomena. It's not the other way around technically. So these are some of the growth challenges that we have in 2020.
So I know you mentioned about educating. How do you approach positioning and messaging in this rapidly evolving market so that you are able to really educate buyers about a solution like this? What approaches are you taking to do that?
The best approach is a very research oriented approach that we take. So when we talk to a customer, we don't just demo our product or anything. We actually go extremely detailed in terms of what agentic automation can actually do to their organization. It's an extremely highly customized study that we do on the customer, and then we get into the implementation aspect of it. So that is already giving some sense of comfort for the customer to really understand what to expect from a platform like Wexa in this instance, or any sort of agentic automation platform. So they will also be able to weigh in what sorts of use cases that they wanted to tackle in the near term and in the longer term as well. So that's the number one approach that we usually take. And hands-on end-to-end approach that we take. We don't just give the platform. We go and we become more or less like partners for our customers. We take the responsibility of implementing the entire solution for them as well, and then sharing the outcome as well. So this is something different that we are doing here, because it might go with contrary to the traditional approaches where nobody likes human intensive sort of jobs, even in the automation space as well, because that would hurt the scalability of the startup. That is conventional wisdom. Today things have changed a lot. Even some things that are conventionally done can be radically different. Just to give you an example, the research reports that we usually send across to our customers, on an average in pre-AI world, to make one research report, it's going to take between 6 weeks to 8 weeks. So that's the level of research that we're really talking about. And probably it's going to cost between $20,000 to $30,000 just for that one report alone. Here we are really talking about building that report in less than 6-7 hours. So the level of productivity increase that we are really talking about is massively high, even in the service industry for us. So that kind of puts us in a very different gamut of play here, and that also reduces the time to implementation for us. So that's differently that we are doing using AI as well internally. We are an AI first organization on one side, so we practice implementing AI top, left, right, bottom, and center. So that's a different approach that we're taking here.
So, of course, every founder journey has some challenges, right? So, what's been the most frustrating or complex problem that you've had to solve as you've grown Wexa?
So with Wexa, what happened or happens as well is the pace at which technology is moving. I don't say that this is the biggest challenge, but this is part and parcel of how things would be dealt in this on this side of the world, especially when you're building a platform in the agentic space. So you kind of have to keep up with every change that is actually happening. So the shelf life of whatever that you're building is very less now. So normally in the traditional software world, especially in the product industry, the average shelf life is between 6 months to 12 months. But here, by the time we merge the PR into production, there are instances where the shelf life is already over. So we're really talking about like days, literally. So, and again, everybody is also competing to ship faster in that whole, game of shipping faster and faster and faster. You tend to innovate faster, and the pace at which you innovate is also extremely intensive. So put together, it's a day in and day out. It's more about what sort of deliverables that you are shipping into the market, and what sort of innovation you are able to do better with the new technology that is coming in as well. So that is number one challenge that we soon see. Number two challenge, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, it is more about customer traction. It does take time, especially if you're staying as a horizontal platform, and if you're an enterprise, you kind of have to go in detail and understand a lot of aspects before converting a customer. So that's usually the second biggest challenge.
How are you managing keeping up with this rapid pace, as well as kind of staying on your main track that you had for Wexa, as well as keeping the quality there? How are you kind of managing all of that?
The first thing is we kind of automated most of our organization. So that's the number one thing that we've done here, because especially when you let's say when you look from growth aspect. So most of the elements related to growth hacking and and whatever things that needs to be done in order to make sure that you're staying afloat and you're talking to customers continuously, all of that process is kind of handled by Vexa itself. So we have automated our own internal processes using Vexa, so that's taken care. In fact, that goes 24/7 for us. On the other side, what is humanly intensive for us is how do we keep up with the technology and how do we make sure that our technology is relevant within the market. So it's a balanced act again out here, and that's how we are solving this problem.
And in terms of your buyers, what are some of the biggest pain points or objections you hear when selling to organizations?
So number one pain point that we usually keep hearing is more in terms of repetitive work. So places where organizations see that they cannot fill those positions with people is usually the place where Vexa kind of fits in really, really well. And that's a problem that we keep hearing as well. Because in any organization that you can think of, there will be jobs that humans don't want to do, or there will be jobs where the attrition rates are actually higher. And that's something that organizations always wanted to solve first, and that kind of comes onto our table as the first one, because since they are like repetitive work, it is easy to automate. So that's one part. The second biggest challenge that we usually see within organizations is the data itself, because they might have the intent of implementing AI within the organization or agentic automation, but they don't have the data to actually really, or the processes to really achieve that. So that's another biggest challenge. So we kind of have to start from data accrual to accreditation to sovereignty, and then we kind of have to solve the agentic automation platform. So we might enter with a different agenda, but we might actually start with a very different plan altogether. So that's what happens usually, and those are the usual challenges that we keep hearing.
So, say if they are one that doesn't have the data to even implement the system, is your company helping them figure out what they need to do to even get to that point? Or is it more of a here's what you need to do, and then we'll connect once you have this to implement our solution?
So in our case, the platform itself kind of covers both the aspects. Like if you have the data, we connect to the existing data lakes, and then the system becomes more like an orchestrator of different data points that are there within the organization. In the other case, if they don't have the data, that's even more better with a platform like Vexa, because pretty much everything can be built from scratch. And organizations that don't have data actually have a much better edge with a platform like Vexa, because they don't carry any legacy, hurdles, and that makes them have a much larger canvas to draw their flowcharts. So that's an advantage in a way, actually, not a disadvantage.
Okay, that makes sense. So, looking ahead, what are your top priorities or milestones that you're aiming for to hit over the next 12 months?
So in the next 12 months, I think biggest goal that we have is to bring in serious return on investment for the initial set of customers that we have, because the proof point for a sector like this is more about what sort of benefit that we are able to bring to the organizations, because this is the concept itself is new. Even organizations are also trying it for the first time, so this is not something that existed before. So that kind of puts us more in a situation where we'll also have to prove to the organizations that okay, hey, fine, they have spent their money in the right direction, as well as we also built a great technology that could actually help before we can scale to the next level. So we don't want to overpromise to anyone. So we are very realistic in terms of what we cater to the needs of the customers. But at the same time, this is something that we have set out as a goal for 2025.
And how do you define or measure your success with Wexa? Are there specific metrics or outcomes that you really keep a close eye on?
So this part of the question, I would say, there are two sides of it. Okay, so one is more from a customer standpoint of view. From our perspective, if the objective that the customer has set in terms of benefits that they wanted to accrue because of agentic automation. If we are able to really solve that problem, then obviously, we are the winners there. On the other side, from a platform standpoint of view, one of the metrics that we carefully observe is, how much of the usage that the platform actually has within the organization. So it's not just about deploying the platform, it's more about, is it really augmenting the humans with AI or not, with agentic automation or not. So, and is it actually solving the real pain points of the humans within the organization or not? What are the utilization numbers within the organization? So those are the things that we closely observe, and how fast we are actually able to implement a particular solution for an organization. That is also the second one that we look at very closely.
And one question I also like to ask different leaders on this podcast is, what's one piece of advice that you would give to other founders or business leaders navigating growth or leading a business like this in a fast-moving space that incorporates AI and automation?
So first of all, being an entrepreneur itself is one of the toughest decisions that anybody could have taken. And on top of it, if the industry is extremely fast moving, the only solution that anybody would be having as well is how fast you are innovating and how relevant you are keeping your product within the organization. I think that's the number one priority that you should be having. And the second one obviously is, are you actually practicing, what you're teaching? So that's the other point, especially in the automation space. These organizations, really prove a point. They will not be able to prove it to other organizations as well. So because those are the first set of questions that you would be asked, and you should always be ready for those answers with numbers.
Yeah, great advice. So for those who want to learn more about Wexa AI or connect with you, can you share where the best place is?
I think first is my email, so kiran@wexa.ai. So I'm always there, and I live on LinkedIn literally, practically. So please do send me a LinkedIn request or DM me on LinkedIn. I'm always there.
Well,
And
thank
on
you,
Twitter.
everyone. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Mo's Market Pulse. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a comment, and join us again to hear more insights from leaders on future episodes. Well, thank you again for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.